Well, my first memory of painting or drawing is from kindergarten. I used to sit in kindergarten and kids would gather around me and watch me draw airplanes. So it went from that to comic strip characters in elementary school. By high school, I was doing very fine black and white, realistic, photographic-like portraits with a pencil. One of my greatest influences, it was actually a life-changing experience for me, came in college. I had decided to major in art, and lo and behold, I met a gentleman. His name was Hank Keeling. Hank studied under Hans Hofmann and various other artists that you'll find in most art history books in New York City for years. And Hans Hofmann was an abstract expressionist, so Hank was also very influenced by impressionists. And it actually worked out miraculously for me, because I wanted to break away from the uptight black and white super realistic artwork that I was doing at the time, and I wanted to go to the impressionistic landscape route. And Hank helped me with that. Matter of fact, my drawings were really impressive, and I was told by everybody that they were impressive, and I was very impressed by them. And he asked me to bring in some of my artwork, and unbeknownst to me, he wanted to see where I was at so he could determine what he needed to do with me to take me where I wanted to go. And I remember I laid all my drawings out on a table, and what he told me was the absolute last thing I was expecting. There were no compliments, and he said, well, we've got a lot of work to do. And he had me go purchase some watercolor paper and watercolor paints, which are very difficult to control. So to try to meticulously dive into a watercolor was next to impossible. And that was how he taught me to move away from linear line, linear drawings, and linear perspective to using color as a way to achieve expression and perspective. And it took all of about a year and a half before I was able to finally loosen up and do drawings like the ones that we have here at my current show, without him standing over me, browbeating me into submission, so to speak. One of the most profound experiences I've had since I started to paint with color, which would have been about halfway through my college experience. It was right between my sophomore and junior years. We were sitting in a classroom, a big, old, somewhat antiquated classroom with a very high ceiling. And a couple of women in the back of the room started to create a lot of chaos. And apparently several wasps had gathered and come through the window and were flying around them. They were afraid they were going to get stung. And Hank Keeling, my art professor, tried to get them to settle down, and he went over to a cabinet that had several hundred different shades of color of construction paper. And he gazed at the cabinet for literally a couple minutes, and there must have been 15 or 20 shades of green, for example. And he pulls out a shade of green, and he walks back to where they're at, and he held it up in the air. And while they were freaking out, swatting at the wasp, within a couple of minutes, 3 wasps landed on the sheet of green paper that he had there. And once he was sure he had all of them, he walked over to the window and shook the paper. And I thought, man, that's how powerful color is. I mean, that's the way it affected me. you know, probably looked like a leaf, but when he did that, I thought, boy, I am hitching my wagon to this guy, and I'm going to follow it all the way to the end. And boy, am I glad I did. He's just such a big piece of what I do today. What got me here to this show is a long story. When I got out of college, when I graduated, I went away from art into financial services. And at the time, it was never really a question of wanting art as a career. For me, it was, could I have art as a career? But so I went into financial services, and I was in financial services for almost 25 years. But something was drawing me back to the art. What happened is I, for lack of a better way to describe it, financial services was getting the best of me. It wasn't where my heart was at, and it was starting to show. And I was less and less interested in it at the end. By the day, by the hour, I was very aware at how disinterested I was becoming in continuing on with financial services. And I felt like I was dying. And the only thing that made me feel alive was doing artwork. And so I made the switch, and I accumulated about 50 or 60 pieces of art. And the next logical step was a show. And I met my partner, and she has a lot of experience in project management. And quite frankly, without her, I wouldn't be in this show. She is the one who initiated the relationship with the curator of the gallery here and set me up with an interview. And we sat down, and she saw 2 or 3 pieces of my work and said, yes, we want you to do a show here. And that's how I ended up here at the Lou Griffin Gallery.